Today on First Century Foundations, we take a trip to Masada with archaeologist and friend Dr. Bahat, where we learn about mikvahs. And then we have a special message from the Jerusalem Institute of Justice. Don't go away, it all starts right now. Welcome back to the program, everybody. And today I'm really excited to be back here at Masada. And we really have a great program today. We're doing something a little bit different. In the past, we've come here to Masada and we've given the general history that most people know about. But today we're here with a really, just a dear friend, a well-known archaeologist. You dug here a long time ago. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the discoveries that were made. First of all, welcome to the show again, Danny.
Thank you, welcome.
Now, I understand that as you've flown around the world, people have recognized you from the program.
That's true.
That's true?
Yes, it helps sometimes.
Yeah, he's a great guy, just a wealth of information, so much experience. Danny, let's talk a little bit about why are we starting here? Because there's a whole surface. Why have we decided to start here?
Well, we are standing here at one of the points which I think are the highlights of the visit to Masada. The Jewish historian Josephus Flavius tells us that when the Jews, besieged by the Romans, decided that instead of fall into the hands of the Roman and become slaves to the Romans, it's better to die as free men or free people.
By their own hands.
By their own hands. So what did they do? First of all, every man killed all the members of his family, wife, children, whoever was there. Wow. The men gathered in this place, which is quite wide, but not in this very corner, and I'll explain why I go concentrate in this very corner. And they cast a lottery in which they had to decide which will be the 10 chosen people to kill the other men. The last one, after they did it, the last one, who was the commander or the leader of the people at Masada, committed suicide and killed his wife and children. They actually found the skeletons of a man, a woman, and a child down in the royal palace. Wow. The point is that the man, the skeleton was still found covered with scales made of silver, you know, as protection.
Right.
And therefore we understand, since it was silver and all the other ones which we found were of copper, we understand that he must be the commander or something like that.
What was his name?
Elazar ben Yair. We found 10 inscribed pottery shards, actually 11. One of them was Ben Yair, who was the commander of the revolt, and all the others you could see that the names are names of people as they will refer to each other. One was called the one with the curly hair.
Oh, like a nickname?
Like nicknames. Other one was called the man who comes from the valley of Jezreel. Okay. Another one was called the fisher, which probably before they came to Masada he was a fisher.
Sure.
Another one, the son of the baker. And all kind of names like this, and of course the name of Ben Yair, the commander of Masada. From this we gathered that the lethal lottery took place in this very room where we are standing now. Wow. And this is to me one, if people ask me, what is the greatest discovery you've made in your life? I say, besides many other things, definitely the 10 pieces of pottery are actually the highlight of the finds I've ever found in my life. And it's fantastic. You hardly ever you can see, you read about an event and you with your own hands, you're holding the event.
Okay, so Danny, we're coming into the area where you found the pottery shards.
It was right here.
Wow.
You see, this wall was not as high as it is today. It reached only as far as here.
Okay.
So I stood here, imagine, with 2 buckets, one of clean water, one of water which got dirty.
Yeah.
Every piece of pottery they gave me, I put into one bucket, and then the second one with the clear water, checking what it is. And out of the so many shards which were discovered, we had 11 of those, including Ben Yair, which means 10 plus Ben Yair.
I can imagine for you, okay, you're a Jewish man, you speak and read Hebrew, your language was dead for almost 2,000 years. it's revived, and then here you are picking up these shards that were written 2,000 years ago, but you could still read them. I mean, that's miraculous. That's crazy.
That's true, and that's one of the. I always speak about it that for many, many years, with the beginning of Zionism, the movement which said the Jewish people should live in their country, archaeology played a very important role. You know, the discovery of a synagogue, of a ritual bath all over the country. In the Golan Heights, there are tens of synagogues, and everywhere. Today, of course, the story is completely different after the State of Israel was established and it is already fait accompli. But I think in this sense of historical events, which you can see, this point is the highlight of all.
What's significant about this site?
In Judaism, one of the basic things is purity.
Okay.
Which means you always, in case you are contaminated by any reason, by any body emissions or whatever, you've got to immerse yourself in a ritual bath. The principle in ritual bath is that water must be running by gravitation. You cannot take a bucket and fill a ritual bath.
It's called living water.
Living water, exactly. So what did they do here? Since Masada is a desert, and sometimes it cannot rain, it can happen that it won't rain for 1 year or the other, what did they do? Here where we are standing, there was a gutter coming down, and you can see this little funnel-like thing. From here, water will go into this container, into this kind of basin.
Right.
Okay? Now, in case there is plenty, it will go also from here through a hole which connects it to the ritual bath. This is the ritual bath. The part where water is coming is called treasury, because it's a treasury of pure water, living water.
Okay.
Now, they will immerse themselves here. Now, imagine what happens later. Today, there was rain, water is pure, coming by the rain, and everything is beautiful. But then, no rain anymore. The year after, no rain.
Right.
If everybody is going to immerse himself here, water will be dirty.
That's right.
It's terrible. So what did they do? They kept the living water, the treasury, and it has a connection between the two.
Yeah.
And so they can take out great quantity of dirty water, bring in ordinary water, but because of the connection, because this water, the pure water, is touching the water there, it was considered in a certain ratio, of course.
Right.
It was considered a pure ritual bath, and that's how they used. The most exciting thing is here that when you stand here on the top of the mountain, where you can see the Roman camps, but you can see the artificial Roman siege ramp.
The ramp.
You see this enormous ramp, which was quarried, the soil was taken from there, bringing it to here and making slowly the ramp. And you can imagine that the Jews are standing and they see every day higher and higher and higher. On top of it, they build a siege wall. It's a siege tower with a battering ram. What did the Jews do? They gathered here, you can see pile of those stones, which they rounded them to make them into a ball and rolling them down in order to frustrate the Romans. What did the Romans do? They brought Jewish slaves so that the Jews will not hurt them. But the Jews said, do it, try to stop it. Because remember that Masada was a symbol of the last place of Jewish withstanding the Roman siege, or altogether the Roman rule on the country. The fall of Masada symbolizes the end of Jewish independence in this country.
Till 1948.
When the State of Israel was founded,
Now, do we know, Danny, how long it took the Romans to build this ramp? Because that's massive amounts of dirt.
4 or 5 months at least.
Wow. Constantly pouring and pouring.
Pouring and pouring. And I'll tell you, you can see here and there pieces of wood. When you go down this trail, you can still see the wood. They made scaffoldings of wood over which they made the field to make it more steady.
I understand.
Yes. With the amount of slaves after the fall of Jerusalem, they had enough people to make the work.
Very cool. Again, Danny, what's the last thing that you want to show us up here at Masada?
The history of Masada has got great importance also in Christianity.
Okay.
So I want to take you to the church, which is also very, very interesting, because it is a good example of the settlement of monks in the Judean desert. The monastic Christian movement started in Egypt moved to the area around Gaza on the coast because this is the closest to Egypt. But the greatest amount of monasteries of early Christianity are found in the Judean desert, and definitely Masada is one of the best examples.
Okay.
2 of those monasteries, or 3, are still functioning today.
Wow.
After 1600 years.
Amazing.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to the church.
This is very Byzantine. You can tell just by the architecture.
Yes, indeed.
Now, before we start, let me say, this is the second time we've been in church together.
That's true.
Do you remember the first time?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, Dr. Bahat
Yes.
came and co-spoke with us at a conference at our church, but now
Yes.
we're in a different kind of church, right?
Different kind of church, extremely important to the history of early Christianity.
Okay.
Because this is a good example of Hermites living in the desert and meeting here, probably 6th century. The story, there are a few things. First of all, the story is all this was covered with mosaics. You can still see the foundation to the mosaic floor and some fragments here and there. Where we are standing, you see there is no foundation to the mosaic floor. Here was a little crypt kind of things behind the altar.
Right.
And we found here was a reliquium of something.
What's that?
You know, we found down below, it was open, a box which looked like a sarcophagus, you know, of a dead man's chest, but smaller scale, something like that.
Oh, okay.
And inside we found some bones.
Oh, wow.
It must have been the bones of a saint or something, a reliquia, yes, old remains, you know, of saints or things of the like. Which means the church was of considerable importance when he had relics of a holy, whoever it was. This church is really beautiful. Look at the wall, the way by which the walls were made. Plaster to make it even, stuck with stones to keep it stronger, stones and pieces of pottery, over which it must have been whitewashed or whatever. I don't know if you have ever made it, but because of the lime, which you see, probably it was like that. There is another room on the side. It can be a sacristy, it can be anything, with beautiful mosaic floor, very simple, but still, considering the place where we are in the middle of the desert, it is really very exciting and, as I said, a good example to early Christian monastic life in the Holy Land.
What a beautiful piece of history that we still have here.
Yes, Masada attracted. By the way, it got an Arabic name. It was called in Arabic Sebe, which I don't know what it means.
The church or the whole site?
The whole site.
Okay.
And for years it was named like that. When it was identified by the first scholars who came to the West with Masada, the Arabs also accepted the name Masada, but they did not call it Masada, they call it Masada. Why Masada is important? Because Masada in Arabic is a name for a mountain which is difficult to climb.
Ah, okay.
You see, so
and
that's how
it
makes sense, yes.
Okay.
And the acceptance of this as Masada of Josephus Flavius is beyond doubt.
Don't go anywhere. Next, I'm going to explain the ancient ritual bath known as a mikvah and tell you how it relates to a story with Jesus and a leper.
God's Holy Days, the new DVD teaching series by Joe Amaral. Filmed in a conference speaking environment, infused with rich visuals such as photos and realistic video reenactments. This series will take you on an exciting journey of discovery. In God's Holy Days, you'll learn the meaning behind many symbolic parallels that have long been forgotten by the church. Find out why most Western believers have little knowledge of these feasts and how much there is to gain once we understand them. This 3.5-hour teaching series will show you how Jesus is both concealed and revealed in the feast of the Lord, from Passover through Tabernacles. You'll be amazed as Joe describes in detail how these feasts can still powerfully apply to all believers everywhere. Included with the purchase of this DVD is a 7-week study guide to help you personally apply these many truths. To order your copy, call right now, 1-877-628-2800.
Well, I got to say, how awesome was it to be able to spend today's On Location segment with Dr. Dan Bahat at Masada. You know, over the past year since we started doing First Century Foundations, I've been up to Masada numerous of times. Every trip, guaranteed 100%. We take our tour groups there, and it's one of the highlights for people. The view of the Dead Sea from Masada is stunning. to look and see the siege ramp of the Romans. It kind of blows your mind when you think back to Hollywood movies and you think, wow, this is like a real one built, 2,000 years ago, and the remains of it are still here. And to walk around the whole site, it was just, it was awesome, because I've seen it so many times, but being with Dr. Dan Bahat, one of the original archaeologists on the site, it just brought a whole new perspective. And I really hope that as we walked around, that you were able to learn new things. Even if you've been watching the show for a long time, hopefully there was something that might have hit you. Well, there was something that hit me, something that was different this time. Again, I've been there literally, without exaggerating. I've been there dozens and dozens of times, and I've seen the same ruins over and over again. And much like the Bible sometimes, you could read the same passage in Matthew over and over, and one day, for almost no reason, it jumps out at you and it makes sense that day. Well, as we were walking, and Dan Bahat pointed out the mikvah, it hit me, and he began to talk about the cleansing of the water and how over time it would become dirty. And there was that treasury, that little canal that would link the two, and it would declare the water to be clean, and it was called living water. And I began to think about the teachings of Jesus, and I began to think of Jesus himself. And we look at a story in Matthew chapter 8, and there's something there where a leper comes to Jesus and he says, Lord, if you're willing, I want you to make me clean. And it's interesting because he doesn't say, Lord, if you're willing, can you heal me? But he says, can you make me clean? And people will say, well, is there a difference between being healed and being clean? Well, as we go back and understand what a mikvah was, we realize there really was a difference. Now, this is where understanding the culture really helps us to really focus on what Jesus was actually doing and what he was saying, and also on what the man was asking Jesus to do. Whenever I travel, the thing that I really try to put in people's mind the most is that you've got to put yourself in the mindset of the audience that Jesus was talking to. And it's so easy for us in North America or in different parts around the world to try and take our culture and force it onto the Bible instead of letting the Bible's culture throw itself onto us. And when we do that, things make a lot more sense. It's not so much that we misunderstand Jesus, but we won't really fully understand Jesus until we get the culture. Take this case, for instance. The text says that this man had leprosy and he was in the village, and he was talking to Jesus within earshot. Jesus comes over, touches him. I mean, there's a lot of no-nos there. To a North American crowd, you might not see them, but here's how it was in those times. If you had leprosy, you were not allowed to come into the village. In fact, you couldn't even come near the gate. You had to stand at a distance. And if you'll recall, in other parts of the gospel, there were 10 lepers who stood at a great distance, and they called out to Jesus, right? And they said, son of David, have mercy on us. And what did Jesus do? He didn't say, you know what, forget the laws, forget what Moses said. Everybody come in, let's all hug each other, let's all make it nicey nice. That's not what happened. The Bible says that Jesus yelled back at them and said, go, and as you walk, you'll be healed. And so Jesus is always keeping the law. He's keeping the cultural and the religious requirements of that day. So in this story, if this man truly does have leprosy, first of all, what's he doing in the village? And secondly, why is Jesus touching him? What's changed here from the previous story? In the one, he's calling from a distance and he won't touch them. But here, he gets down and he touches the man. And again, if we don't fully understand the cultural implications of the cleansing rituals of that day, we're not really going to get the full story here. So we want to try to understand the difference between healing and cleansing. Let me take you back to a ritual, something that took place all the time in the days of the temple. 3 times a year, the Jewish men from all over the then known world, they were called by God to come to the temple during the Feast of Passover, the Feast of Pentecost, and on the Day of Tabernacles. So 3 times a year, men would have to make a journey here to Jerusalem, to the temple, which is not too far from here. And there they had to present themselves before the Lord. They couldn't come empty-handed. There was all kinds of rules and rites that they had to perform. But this is what would happen. Men would travel in these huge groups together for safety, for protection. And so they would travel together. And I want you to imagine, if you can for a moment, this huge group of men, maybe 50 men, 100 men, I don't know. And they're traveling for days, sometimes even weeks, to make it here to Jerusalem. And by the time they get to Jerusalem, now today it's cold, it's slightly rainy, and so we're not really feeling the heat. But if you come during some of these feasts, it's during the springtime, it is hot here in the land. You would be sweating, you would be smelly, sorry to say that, by the time you got to Jerusalem. And imagine when you got there, there was these things called mikvahs. Now Dan Bahat talked about this up at Masada, where what you would do is you would disrobe, you would go in on one side of the stairs, and you would go down into the tank, you would completely immerse yourself, you would come back out on the other side, and you would be clean. Imagine the first man after that long trek through the desert. Imagine being sweaty and feeling gross and wanting to be refreshed, and you see that mikvah and you run for it, you make a beeline for it, and the first guy goes in, and he dips or refreshes, he feels so great. Then the 5th guy goes in, and the 50th guy goes in, and the 500th guy goes in, and who knows how many other guys go in. And you can imagine after a while, no matter, even though it was just for ritual and for spiritual cleansing, after a while, you tell the rabbi, "Rabbi, this water isn't kosher anymore," you know? So what were the rabbis and the priests to do? They didn't have the luxury of just throwing the water out. It's not like back home in North America where, hey, the water's dirty, no problem. Empty it, fill it back up in the bathtub, and there you go. Jerusalem is a desert. And it doesn't rain a lot in the spring and the summer. In fact, it doesn't rain at all. In the wintertime, they have to harvest, they have to gather all of the rains. And so what the rabbis did was they had these containers just to the side of the mikvahs, and they would catch all the rain from the wintertime, and they would store them. And they had these little aqueducts, kind of like a half hose, coming from this container down to the top of the mikvah. And when the water became declared to be unclean, they would open and close real quick, and a drop or two would just come out. Now remember, that's called living water because it comes from heaven. It's water not brought by the hands of man, and it comes from springs, it comes from rivers, and it comes from rain. And so this one drop of living water would come down, and it would just touch the top of the water. And then the whole tank was declared to be clean. Now with that in mind, I want us to go back now to the story in Matthew. I want you to think back to that man who said, "Don't heal me, Jesus, but if you can, make me clean." Why did he say that? Because he probably heard Jesus teaching himself, or he heard about his teaching. Or he heard there was a rabbi from the Galilee. He claims to come from God directly. He says he is the living water. And if this guy is the Messiah, if this rabbi, Yeshua, truly is who he says he is, then he has the power to cleanse me. Because he is the living water of God, and one touch from him will make me clean. And can you understand now why Jesus looks at him with such empathy, with such compassion, and he says, not only am I willing, I am able, because I am the living water. And when Jesus reaches down and he touches that man, he declares him to be clean, and before God, that man is clean. This is one of the small insights that you can get when you start to study the Hebraic roots. You know, people say, you know, if I don't study the roots, you know, am I still a Christian? Will I still go to heaven? All this kind of stuff. Well, of course you will. But that's not the point. The point is this: if you want to fully understand your Savior, if you fully want to understand your Master, you've got to go back to the Hebraic roots. And when you do, the scriptures, they just come alive. Coming up, we hear a special message from our friends at the Jerusalem Institute of Justice, right here on First Century Foundations.
For 2,000 years, man has been studying the life and words of Jesus. But in our modern culture, can we truly understand what he really meant? Now we can. Joe Amaril's book, Understanding Jesus, removes the veil of history and brings us greater understanding of the time and culture that Jesus and the authors of the Bible lived in. In Understanding Jesus, we study the feasts of the Lord as Jesus celebrated them and find valuable insights into God's prophetic timetable throughout history. Knowing more about his ancient culture will give you accurate insight of the teachings of Jesus and will take your faith to a whole new level. This life-changing book can be yours for just $20. Call today and order your copy of Understanding Jesus by Joe Amaral, 1-877-628-2800, or visit us online at www.firstcentury.tv.
It says in the word, justice and justice alone shall you pursue. You'll be able to inherit the land that the Lord your God has given you. We in the Jerusalem Institute of Justice advance justice. This project here is our Passover Distribution, where we bring justice to the poor and needy by providing everything they need for a large family to get through the holidays with joy and enjoyment. And we want to thank you, our donors, who faithfully give to us and strengthen our hands and allow us to be a source of justice to the needy in the land of Israel. Thank you, and have a happy Passover season.
We are here in this large warehouse in Bet Shemesh, which is a city not far from Jerusalem. The warehouse at this point is empty, but before it was filled with baskets of food, full of vegetables and fruits that we're distributing to needy families in Jerusalem. I believe that we've given enough to help 3,000 families today so that they can enjoy the Passover holidays. And we just want to thank you so much, those of you that have donated to JIJ, that have enabled us to be able to bless these families in Israel.
Here we are at the Jerusalem Institute of Justice Passover Distribution of 2012. We're handing out today brand new grocery carts filled with all kinds of groceries, food, and drink to larger families that live under the poverty level. We're able to bring them what we call social justice, or tzedakah, to help them get through the holidays with joy. We want to thank you, our donors, from the bottom of our hearts for making this possible, for being vessels of love and for blessing to the Israeli people, to help us strengthen the social fabric of our society. Thank you and have a happy holiday.
This has been a really great program for me today. I always enjoy hanging out with Dr. Dan Bahat. He's become a really good friend over the years. We joke a lot, but at the end of the day, he's just such an esteemed archaeologist, and I appreciate, his volunteering to come with us here today. Because so much of his life was involved in archaeology, and this is such a special site to him, he doesn't like to come here very often because he doesn't want it to become just so mundane for him. So he only comes on special occasions, and we really, really appreciate the fact that he took the time to come with us here. And I really appreciated learning all the history of Masada. I've heard it so many times when I come with my tour groups, but just to hear it again, to hear about what Israel has gone through as a nation. We talked about in the program that it wasn't until 1948 that Israel experienced its independence, and for almost 2,000 years, the Jews were scattered all over the world, and they've been able to come back to here to this homeland. And coming back here to Masada, it reminds us of everything that they've gone through. And just being able to see in the museum here where those shards were found, that Dan found here so long ago, and seeing those names in Hebrew, pop up and being unearthed, what an experience that must have been for him. And I hope that you enjoyed experiencing it for yourself. And it was so great learning about the mikvah, both from a secular perspective, from a historical perspective, and then making a connection to a New Testament story. I hope that you've enjoyed watching the show because we've really enjoyed making it. And we want to stay connected to you as our viewers. And I'm going to invite you to follow us on Twitter. My account is @JoeAmaralTweet, or you can go to Facebook and you can follow me there as well. And every time I come to Israel, as I travel throughout the country in different parts of the world, I always like to post videos and pictures just to kind of keep you in touch with what we're doing. We want to stay in touch with you. We want you to keep following us. Again, I want to thank you for watching the program today, and we'll see you next time here on First Century Foundations.